area of human endeavour, whether it's education, whether it's health, sustainability, or employment. What also makes NatStats so successful and so interesting is the quality of speakers that it attracts and the international perspective that it gives us. We welcome to our conference now the Director of the United Nations Statistics Division, Professor Paul Chung. Professor Chung facilitates the development of the global statistical system and coordinates the work of the United Nations Statistical Commission. He oversees a massive program of work that includes the development of international statistical standards, the dissemination of global statistical data, the provision of technical advice to member states in the development of national statistical systems, the coordination of international statistical activities, and the delivery of program support to the UN system on all statistical matters. He's well known around the world for his contributions to the development of official statistics, and we thank him very much for joining us at this conference. Professor Paul Chung.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. It was indeed a very wonderful dinner last night, and I hope you get away with a message that all Asians look alike. But not all Asians can crack jokes. So don't expect any wise remarks from me. I've been asked to say a few words of welcome on this second day of the conference. And it's kind of strange because when I got this assignment, because I traveled the furthest, I came all the way from New York, and then I had to say a few words of welcome. But on the other hand, I figured that it's also very reasonable because, in a way, I represent the global statistical community. And this discussion today is not only important for Australia on a national basis, but your discussion will also have a global impact. Because I travel to many countries. Many countries are discussing exactly the same set of issues. And the way you have organized it, the way you have positioned this particular conference, the issue that you cover are of immense importance to the development of the global statistical agenda. So in that, I very much welcome this particular conference. And I said, many countries will welcome the outcome of this particular meeting. So when you put your piece of paper in the suggestion box, making a recommendation for the ABS to take the work program forward, you're also helping ABS to take the issues to the world and helping the global statistical system forward. In fact, the first issue of the map, the framework for measuring Australian progress, the first book, I first saw it in Singapore when I was Singapore's chief statistician. And I thought, wow, it was really a great book. So I read through it, and we used some of this in Singapore context. And that book was, in fact, the starting point of all the global discussion on the so-called now the progress framework. And it was the forerunner for the OECD, the Progress of Societies project. So you should be proud. Your work is leading the path for the whole world in the development. So what have we learned yesterday? And what are we going to do today? The title of the conference is very apt, Measuring What Counts. Yesterday we dealt with economic development. Today we'll deal with well-being and the issues on progress. And yesterday we focused on the impact of policy design and the various new challenges. The users were free and very willing to offer their ideas. But I was struck by the keynote speaker's suggestion that at the end of the day, there must be a bold assessment of priorities for data development and collection. I think this came from Paul, the second keynote speaker. And at the end of the day, I think Brian Ping and his colleagues will have a big problem on hand, taking on board all these suggestions from various breakout sessions from the keynote speakers. Then how do you prioritize? And how do you put where the money to what the project that is important. As the speakers were asking repeatedly for conceptual framework, I was thinking, sitting there listening, a little jet lag, and I must confess that I fell asleep a few times. I won't tell you at which session. But this leads me to ask the question, are we doing a good job globally in coming out the kind of statistical framework to deal with all these issues? And it's an interesting thinking, interesting thought. And I would like you to share with me your thinking on this. Are the current statistical frameworks adequate to deal with the issues on hand? When we're talking about economic development and counting what is important, I was thinking about our 2008 SNA revision. We just finished a global process with many countries involved, serious discussion on how should we measure GDP. The book came out 2008. It was issued. Now we are just waiting for all the countries to implement the suggestions. The revision was necessary because the global economy had changed, the economic structure has changed. We need to take on board all the new issues, so we address it in the SNA framework. But on the other hand, having finished the framework and waiting for countries to implement the SNA and the new way of compiling GDPs, suddenly we realized that, wow, it's not enough. We have not taken on environment and other issues on board. And there are now new discussions that are coming. And so, in a way, that is something to occupational hazard. The moment we finish a long process, finishing of a framework, we find that the framework is already out of date, sort of. And so European Union, they have not even started with the implementation of the 2008 SNA suggestion yet, and then they are already talking about beyond GDP, putting pressure on us to move on even further to something that we haven't even started revising. But there are two issues that we have to take on board. And the first issue, of course, is the impact of environment and the linkage between environment and economy. And that work is a very serious work because I believe in the future, and all of you will share with me, that the linkage between the economy and the environment is the linchpin to our future growth, to our future well-being. We don't solve this problem, in the future we will get really seriously affected by all the consequences. And so we have a process led by Peter Harper to come up with a framework on environmental economic accounting so that we can, in a systematic manner, incorporate the economic changes and linking it to all the environmental changes and linking it with the economic structure and linking it in a systematic way that we have a systematic statistics coming out from this particular framework. At the same time, the whole new movement on the green growth, on the carbon economy, on all this new impact, new talks on the imposition of a whole new carbon regime on our economic, on our industrial production, in terms of import, export, in terms of trade. All these have a tremendous implication for us and how we do our accounting and how do we assess our industrial structure and how do we advise our policy planners where to take our economy in the future, taking consideration of the carbon requirements and all these issues coming from green growth. So we need to examine our framework to see how we can put in all these green growth elements. And so this is another process that we are starting. Today we'll talk about two other topics, well-being and progress. When we talk about progress, you know, I was kind of amused by it because my home country is in Singapore. And Singapore, we are very paranoid about progress. You know, we have all kinds of indicators, all kinds of targets that we want to achieve the target of this and that, and we want to be the, you know, the Switzerland of Asia. We want to be this, and you know, we have all kinds of targets, and we always curious, you know, because we always think that Australia is already a paradise. Then if you are in the paradise, why do you want to worry about progress? I don't think Adam and Eve worry about progress, you know. I mean, so we were quite amused, in fact, when Australia came out with a book on the measuring Australia's progress. And maybe there's some, you know, issues there internally as to why suddenly Australia becomes so gung-ho on the need to what we call convincing yourself that you are making progress. But when we talk about the statistical framework for measuring well-being and framework, I just want to leave you with two thoughts. The first thought is that in our statistical framework, as you know, we always use this accounting framework. We are very good in accounting for the past, but we are not so good in talking about the future. For some reason, this is the blind spot for our profession. We can never solve it. But in accounting, we always concerned about input and outputs. And our outputs are very narrow, and we know what we're talking about when we come to the economic outputs. And although yesterday a lot of discussion were talking about outcomes, what kind of outcomes do we want to achieve? And in this case, I think the issue of well-being and progress becomes important. What is the outcome that we are moving towards? Who is the one deciding on the outcome? When you come to economy, the value added, the economic growth, we know what is the outcome. But the well-being, progress, and this set of outcomes, are they universal? Can we generalize it across all the countries in the world? Can we come up with a common methodology? That's an interesting question. Are the outcomes of well-being progress unique in each country, or are they generalizable around the world? The second question, when we do the accounting framework, we are very static. We count for the past. And we always looking for the change from a benchmark and see how things can move on. But you think about the climate change, the IPCC and UNFCCC community. When they talk about climate change, there are 4 key words that they always use: the risk, the hazard, the mitigation, and adaptation. These 4 words seldom occur, seldom show up in our statisticians' vocabulary. Why is it that we only do accounting for the past and we never do any risk assessment? Why we never examine the hazards to our societies, to our economy, to identify the trouble spots? Why we never talk about mitigation and adaptation strategies? Interesting thought. As I said, this could be our professional blind spot, that we are a bit too focused, and that we never really want to broaden or take an extra step to be a bit more forceful in voicing our professional opinions. Yesterday's discussion also talked a little bit about methodology, because I think it was very clear that in some of the jurisdiction areas, waiting for your survey data to come out is too slow, too late for the fact they need to do their performance assessment. What are the data sources in the future? Are we continuing to rely on census and surveys that are so problematic and so difficult to come out with data on a timely basis? What are the new data sources that we must consider? Also, yesterday, even though it came out on the side, but there was no mention of location-based statistics, location-based information system, the rare issue. Where are things occurring? And how do we know where are the locations? So location-based development strategies are now in fashion. And in fact, it's rightly so. And that requires a whole new demand for statistics. When we talk about well-being, are we talking about national level, or are we talking about location-based? If it's location-based, how do we integrate the GIS information together with other related spatial data infrastructures and link it up with the well of data on statistics and on other kind of administrative information? So today we have a very rich day, and then we'll go now to the keynote speech, and then followed by the breakout sessions. And in the afternoon, we have a panel discussions. I trust all these issues, I hope, will be discussed in one way or another. Thank you very much.
questions, and I would invite him now to address us. Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. My remarks will focus on 2 points. And first of all, I give an example of this from theory to practice, and then using the Millennium Development Goals as an example. I think just now Brian has already alluded to this particular global project. And after that, I will talk about the role of the National Statistical Office in all this, and I would give some views of my own, and I would voice some disagreement that there is a movement. Next week, Wednesday, 136 head of states will be in New York, and they will discuss the 10-year progress of Millennium Development Goals and the commitment to see through to its conclusion. Now, what is this Millennium Development Goals? It started in 2000 when there was a Millennium Declaration, and the world leaders took it on themselves to say that, look, we have to see some results in development. We have to see some actual efforts in reducing human poverty and in elevating some of the living conditions. So in the end, we have 8 goals and then 20 over targets and some other indicators. 10 years have gone by. So every 5 years, the summit will be held, and then the leader will come and recommit themselves to see through it. So this set of goals and targets basically refer to, say, halving the poverty, halving the mortality rates, increasing the education levels. All these are good social well-being kind of indicators. And the countries so far, developed countries, have put a lot of effort into making sure that there is progress towards this. So we produce a report every year, Millennium Development Report, to basically to show whether there has been progress or not. In this case, using Brian's model, we have clear targets, clear outcomes, because we want to halve the poverty by 2015. And halving it is reference to the 1990 reference point. And so we know exactly where we are heading. The question, of course, is that it's not so easy to, on a global level, to actually achieve all these targets. We require resources, require government resource, require whether our ability, statisticians' ability to monitor the global progress. But this set of goals and targets represent real progress indicators on a global level to measure the improvement of living conditions. Now, the question, of course, is 2015 is just around the corner. What happened after that? So at this stage, you know, a few years back, we were already thinking what will happen after when you come to 2015. Will this goal still be relevant, or there will be a new set of indicators? It's an interesting thought. And the kind of goals and the bringing together of the global view to do something good for the world depends a lot at the time on the global leaders, on the world leaders, their thinking, their perspectives, and whether a collective view can be, or collective aspiration, to use Brian's word, can be manifested. So there will be, I presume, various discussions at all levels to, first of all, to review the achievements of the Millennium Development Goals, and later on, after 2015, to establish a whole new set of goals and targets for the world to add on. It may well be equity issues will be involved, distributional issues will be involved, could be climate change issues, something a lot more contemporary than the good old education, mortality, and so on and so forth. Remain to be seen. The discussion will continue, and next week we will see what the world leaders are expressing themselves. I'm not sure whether the Prime Minister of Australia will be there, but I'm quite sure that she would not want to miss the party. So it will be quite interesting to see what she will say in her maiden speech at the UN about what's Australia's position with respect to the Millennium Development Goals. Now, let me say a few words about the role of the NSOs. So much has been talked about this movement, about this progress agenda, and many of the national statistical officers really feel that this progress agenda has really been imposed on the statistical community. All of a sudden, it just come about. You know, I remember, as I said this morning, when I jokingly say that, well, Australia is already a paradise. Why suddenly they are so hung up on progress and start doing all kinds of measurements? And then people will say that, oh, Australians are very laid back, you know. Why would they suddenly so concerned about measuring where they are? And they want to develop some kind of a mental illness? Or what happened to hanging out on the beach and enjoying the natural resources? So what is driving all this sudden anxiety about progress? Well, I don't know. I mean, I thought only the Asians worry about progress, but now it looks like the disease has spread. But the problem about the progress agenda is not that it's not correct. It's a good agenda. We are concerned with progress, but it comes with so many different packages. For one thing, the focus on this progress agenda, as I mentioned, had deflected our attention to looking at other things. What about the risk assessment agenda? What about mitigation and adaptation agenda? Why was we so hung up on progress? I don't understand this, but somehow this has been now the dominant thinking. The second here is that I also don't like the fact that whenever people talk about the progress agenda, the first thing they say is that they use the GDP as a straw man. They beat the hell out of the GDP. Again, again, and again. So many times. I attended many of these conferences. The first thing they say is GDP is no good, cannot measure well-being. That's all Martin already mentioned. Come on, guys. Give the GDP a chance. You know, we are trying so hard to come up with good GDP numbers, and the first thing they say is GDP is not a good number. What do you want? I mean, the right thing to say, of course, is the fact that we all know what GDP is all about. It's a measure of output. It has its problems, but as an index, it serves its purpose. So why don't we just leave it at that? You want to concern about well-being, you want to talk about progress, you want to add other indicators, so be it. Do it. You want to work on the community indicators, fine, but why do you want to beat GDP to death? I mean, sometimes I feel a little bit, the official statisticians are what we call the blue-collar people. We do our work quietly, seriously. We take our profession seriously, and we know what we are doing. But of course, once in a while, we get a lot of these white-collar people coming and telling us what to do, and they have not uttered a single suggestion on how to do it. They just say, come on, more indicators. So we are a little bit stuck. But the problem, the real danger of progress indicator is the potential threat to National Statistical Office as a vital national institution. National Statistical Office produce the critical empirical benchmarks for the country, unbiased, independent, according to international governance standards and norms. The problem now is that we are now venturing into an area that is no longer 100% technical. We are now moving more, I don't know whether to the center or to the left or to the right now, and that's where, the problem. We are now asked to interpret what is progress, what is sustainability. Now, I would bet you to give me a good definition of progress that can be used across the countries. I would bet you also to give me a good definition of sustainability that's measurable. So when Stiglitz came and talked with us, so I said, come on, Professor Stiglitz, half the things that you talk about cannot be measured. Not that we don't want to, but it's just that you know how economists are like. Later on, my friend here, David, will probably defend the economists. A lot of concepts in what they say, it's difficult to operationalize. The problem here is that, coming back to Brian's model, which is very good, Brian said that we as statisticians should focus on the column, on the measurement. Now, the question here is that who is the one that is dealing with the column on the outcomes and aspirations? Who defines these two columns? Is it now ABS? Who would define aspirations? Is it the fact that the National Statistical Office has to go out and consult with the citizens about what are the aspirations, what are the outcomes? But by doing so, are not the statistics and also start engaging in the political process? I would say yes. The moment the NSO go out and discuss with the citizens on the aspirations of progress, we are engaging in politics. And there lies the biggest threat to this very important institution. Now, the question I always ask, is there a conspiracy to get us into trouble? Why the need to push all our blue-collar people out in the limelight and make us into movie stars? We are not movie stars. We are the blue-collar people. We do our work. So tell us what are the aspirations. Tell us what are the outcomes. We will go and measure it. But don't make us go and define progress. The moment we go and define progress, I think we are into serious problems. So that is where our core competence is. So when this whole process started on the progress agenda, many of the national statistical officers were extremely uncomfortable because they are asked to do something that beyond their competence. So that's why there's a lot of hesitation. And some countries move a little bit further, some countries haven't moved at all, and everybody is just watching to see where they stand. The question, will it move further? Will there be more additional measures be incorporated? I'm quite sure that new measures will be incorporated because we incorporate new measures all the time. Whether these measures will be parked under the progress agenda or not remains to be seen. At the end of the day, the National Statistical Office must remain true to its mission as the vital national institution, providing undisputed benchmark to national trends and the measurement of societal changes. Whether these changes are progress or not is up to other people to interpret, but that is where our true mission lies. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul.